Trump needed control of the Justice Department, and he got it. He had people removed who resisted his agenda. He installed people who understood his agenda. He put his own former defense attorney in charge of prosecutions. He pointed the department at his priorities. By any normal definition, this is control. That leads to the question, why is the Justice Department losing easy cases? I don't mean losing in the press. I don't necessarily mean losing the narrative war. Trump is very good at winning the narrative. I mean losing where it really counts, in court. Cases his own administration chose. Cases the president, Trump, stood behind. Prosecuted by the people he picked, and the cases he lost to weak evidence, botched appointments, misconduct findings, and prosecutorial overreach. And here's the question that's really on my mind. Why does controlling an institution look like you're powerful, or does it just give you the opportunity to prove whether you really are powerful? Before we look at a single case, we need to understand what we're actually talking about. Otherwise, this just becomes two people yelling past each other about whether they like Trump. So here's the idea. And I want to say this slowly because everything else depends on this. We're talking about control and power and what that means, the outcomes of control and power. So, specifically, control creates the potential for power. Power itself is measured by outcomes. Winning is the repeated production of those outcomes. That's it. That's what we're looking at here. Some things that do not count as winning, no matter how satisfying they feel. Telling a good story is not a result. Moral certainty is not a result. Dominating a news cycle is not a result. Issuing an order is not a result. An order is the instruction for what should happen. It is not what did happen. And blaming judges, prosecutors, Biden, the media, or the deep state doesn't change the result. It explains the result, but it doesn't reverse the result. And it's the result that you want, not the blame. So here's what I'm thinking. We're going to use this when we're discussing the issues in this video. And I'm going to do this the same way every time. What did Trump publicly say he wanted? He's setting his own goals. What were the goals that he set? What did the DOJ actually do? What were the actions taken by the Department of Justice to achieve what Trump said he wanted? And measurably, what happened? Did Trump's goals, were they satisfied by what the DOJ did? We're not doing mind reading. I'm not even asking that you agree with the policies. I'm not grading Trump against my values here. I'm grading Trump against his own stated objectives. Really, it's the only fair test. He was elected by the Americans to do the things that he promised to do. So all we're going to do is look and see if what he promised actually happened. With the Trin de Argua crackdown, Trump, on his first day in office, signed an executive order directing cartels and transnational criminal groups to be treated as terrorist threats rather than ordinary criminal enterprises. His administration designated 20 Latin American and Caribbean criminal organizations as foreign terrorist threats. The DOJ built a cross-district task force spanning multiple U.S. attorney offices to pursue material support and related charges under that new designation. The result? Since January 20th, 2025, the DOJ has federally charged more than 260 members and associates of the Trendaguas and announced at least 56 criminal cases, convictions, arrests, guilty pleas, and civil forfeitures tied to this material support for the designated FTO. This one has held up. It has charges filed, cases resolved, forfeitures executed, and is not just an announcement. And it has survived reliably in the courts. This has been a big win for the Trump administration. This is not a judgment on whether it was good policy or not. That's out of the scope of this discussion. What this does demonstrate is that the DOJ under Trump can take on complicated, multi-jurisdictional criminal issues and successfully execute the president's goals. Let's talk about the immigrant prosecution surge. As we know, Trump has run on dramatically increasing immigration enforcement and prosecutions. This was one of his core campaign promises. In support of this, he has directed the DOJ to prioritize this if necessary. The DOJ switched its focus, dropping nearly 11,000 cases in February 2025, deliberately reallocating prosecutors to this goal. As a result, the DOJ closed roughly 23,000 non-immigration criminal cases while prosecuting 32,000 new immigrant cases. This is exactly what was promised. And measured against Trump's own stated goals, the DOJ increased prosecutions and cracked down on immigration as the administration said it would and demanded. This has held up reliably in the courts. The president has discretion on where the DOJ should focus its attention. Again, this is not an opinion on whether this was a good policy or not a good policy. This is showing that at Trump's direction, the DOJ successfully executed the president's vision. These are clearly wins. These are clear wins. Challenging them, these are clear wins. Calling them anything else would just be partisan accounting. But, and this is the pivot, this is the point, isolated wins are not the test. Anyone can win once. Anyone can win once. What we're looking for here is consistent winning, whether the organization is repeatedly producing what it says it wants, and whether the way it is operating right now is making that more likely or less likely to happen. And that's what we're going to talk about. Now we're going to talk about some other cases. These are cases that the Trump administration, if not Trump himself, has elevated as important law enforcement issues that demanded the attention of the Department of Justice. These are cases that the DOJ chose to prosecute at the direction of Trump. The sandwich prosecution. A man got into a confrontation with a law enforcement officer and threw a submarine sandwich at him. As a result, he was charged with assaulting an officer. This was elevated by the administration to be at the same level of importance as the Tren de Agua and immigration prosecution cases. This was law and order. The point isn't that somebody threw a sandwich in this case. The point that I'm looking at is that the DOJ spent federal authority and public credibility on a symbolic prosecution and couldn't deliver the result it promised. This was a simple case. It was charged as a felony. It was on tape. It was open and closed. And the DOJ could not get the prosecution. The reflecting pool case. There was extensive damage to the reflecting pool. They admitted to make the reflecting pool look fantastic. 4th of July applied a new blue liner to the reflecting pool. The liner became ripped and fell apart. This was attributed to vandals, and the government specifically applied felony charges against an Olympic athlete for these damages. The government's witness said that the damage existed before this athlete touched the pool. It struggled to isolate exactly how much additional financial harm the defendant caused. They needed to show that he had done enough damage to make it a felony case instead of just a misdemeanor. This was elevated to national interest, and Trump spent a considerable amount of time on national TV discussing the extent of the damage done to this reflecting pool. The Department of Justice position now in trying to accumulate the evidence to prosecute the case has now said that this was not the result of vandalism, but instead was poor application done by the contractor. This is a massive loss. Having the president raising this vandalism, saying that this individual was key to the vandalism, stating it on national news, and then the DOJ having to admit that it was shoddy workmanship and not vandalism. They could have done all this before the charging, before the public statements, but they didn't. And then there's Comey and his seashells. 86-47. I'm not defending Comey. He did some shady things that made a lot of people feel uncomfortable. And I'm not going to say that 86-47 is a nice thing to say. But saying that this is an organized effort to have Trump killed is failing the laugh test. The government is struggling to find references where 86 is used to express death threats. They're struggling to prove that Comey intended it to be a death threat. The burden of proof on the DOJ to bring this about for the little win that it could possibly bring is disproportionate to the effort. And more than likely, and this is even worse, they're going to drop the case or just outright lose it. But let's see what happens. And now, the elephant in the room, or maybe I should say, the Epstein in the files. This is not really a courtroom loss, as the other cases we've discussed, but it is a promise by the administration and by the Department of Justice to deliver on a promised outcome, to bring about the investigation of the people who were involved with Epstein. This was a campaign promise. The DOJ, when they first came into office, repeatedly said that they were going to release the information. This promise has been followed by shifting explanations, visible internal conflict, and real erosion of trust in Trump delivering his promises. This tells you something very important. Control over an institution, in this case, the Department of Justice, doesn't guarantee control over what the institution reveals, withholds, or mishandles. I don't want to give the wrong impression here. The Trump administration and the Department of Justice articulated reasons for all of the above cases. And I'm not questioning those reasons. I'm not even questioning the policies behind those reasons. But what I do want, and I don't want to pretend to think that the Department of Justice or any administration wins all of the cases against it. But these cases is a sampling of what the Department of Justice has been doing. They're not the actual evidence. The actual evidence is the same kind of failure keeps showing up again and again across different offices, different judges, different jurisdictions, different functions. There's a long legacy of the new DOJ having indictments invalidated, prosecutors accused of grand jury misconduct, appointments that are found unlawful, government representations to the court are openly questioned, attorneys, DOJ attorneys referred for discipline, charges dismissed because DOJ compromised its own case, serious prosecutions delayed or rebuilt because they were mishandled initially. This is not just every administration has some of these, but this administration with this Department of Justice has many of these. And here's the detail that matters the most. Some of these rebukes are coming from judges appointed by Republicans, including judges Trump himself had appointed. That fact alone takes away the easiest response to this whole video, to this concern. The judges just hate Trump. The evidence doesn't support that. This pattern is cutting across jurisdictions, even in Republican-friendly courts. And it's increasingly cutting across ideology also. This is the important part. If you remember anything, remember this. Historically, walking into a courtroom, the Department of Justice has normally carried the presumption of built-in institutional advantages. They have been presumed to have competence. They are presumed to have regularity. They carried credibility with the judges. They had experienced personnel. They had procedural discipline. This means that they built their cases carefully and precisely, and they had massive investigative resources. This gave the DOJ an advantage over the people that it was prosecuting. Every one of these is a form of capital, and repeated misconduct, weak representations, and lack of evidence presented to the court spend that capital down. Once judges stop extending automatic trust to the DOJ, its factual claims get more scrutiny. The other side's lawyers get stronger procedural openings. Discovery fights become harder. Cases take longer. Courts start demanding more proof. And here's the cruel part. Honest, careful prosecutors in the DOJ inherit this same skepticism. Honest, careful prosecutors working for the DOJ inherit the same skepticism created by the careless ones. These losses compound on each other. Yesterday's failed cases make tomorrow's cases harder to win. That is the moment when a string of tactical embarrassments turn into actual structural loss of power. And this gives us an example of why control doesn't equal power. For example, poor target selection. The DOJ picking cases because of symbolic or partisan value instead of legal strength, instead of the available evidence. Weak leadership. Promoting loyalty and rhetorical aggression gets treated as a substitute for legal competence and judgment. In the DOJ, you're not promoted because you win cases. You get promoted because you're loyal to the administration and you make the arguments the administration wants to hear. Attacking on bad terrain. Launching cases where there is weak or no evidence. The law is unclear or doesn't actually appear to match the circumstances, or where procedural posture already favors the other side. Basically, picking cases where the circumstances don't give the prosecutors an advantage. It makes everything harder. It increases your chance of losing. And losing is not winning. And then this might be the most damning. Corrupted feedback. Internal warnings get treated as obstruction or lack of loyalty. Losses get blamed on outsiders. The people whose job is to flag problems get sidelined or attacked instead. You need to adapt your arguments, your cases, your focus, and your effort on winning and listen to why people think you're not winning and address those concerns. The current partisanship isn't just making the DOJ look unfair. It's making the DOJ worse at accomplishing its partisan objectives. This is the nonpartisan criticism. You don't have to like or dislike Trump to see that a machine that punishes its own warning lights is a machine that is going to keep breaking things. And his appointment as Attorney General. Todd Blanche hasn't been sitting outside the department waiting to be called in to fix somebody else's mess. He already exercised real authority inside this DOJ. He's participated in, defended, or supervised the department through the period that we've just been discussing. So promoting him can't honestly be framed as an outsider arriving to clean house. He's not outside the picture. He's already inside. The questions that matter. What strategy is going to change? What appointments are going to improve? What weak cases are going to be dropped instead of defended? Whose internal warnings are finally going to get listened to and addressed? What accountability is actually going to follow? What specifically has Blanche learned from the losses that already happened while he was in the DOJ? Without real answers to these questions, more authority just means more of the same, with a bigger signature at the bottom of the page. This is not going to produce more wins for the Trump administration. Appointing Blanche might consolidate control. It might improve coordination. It might even slow down a few of the failures. But that's not the same thing as winning. That would just be losing less. We're not saying a winning DOJ never loses a case. And that's not what makes a winner. What makes a winner is what happens after they lose. Winners pick better targets next time. They learn fast. They protect the things that are actually working. They cut loose the things that aren't working. They replace leaders who don't perform. And they treat defeat as information instead of an insult. A losing organization does the opposite. It protects the story, the narrative, instead of fixing the problem. It picks more symbolic fights to distract from the real ones. It attacks the judges instead of the case file. It blames its predecessors. It shields leaders who keep failing. And this is the tell. It tries to control the feedback that's identifying the failure in the first place. Trump controls the Department of Justice. That gives him the potential for power. But real power is measured by outcomes. And winning is the repeated production of those outcomes. Todd Blanche's title can't manufacture those results. His performance has to. Because control can be appointed, but winning has to be earned. Winners use explanations to learn. Losers use explanations to justify why they're losing. Please like and subscribe. And more importantly, leave your thoughts in the comment section. Share your concerns, your thoughts, your feelings. Let other people know what you think needs to be done. Thank you.